Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to dedicate some words to the issue of or the problem of the Palestinian refugees. These refugees are refugees since 1947-48, since the War of Independence here in Israel, and they are still in refugee camps. Some of them are still in refugee camps, either in Lebanon or in Jordan, or inside the Palestinian Authority, already 73 and more years. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the only problem from the 40s of the last century which still exists. Just compare to Europe. After the Second World War, which ended in 1945, Europe was covered with refugees from every country. Had refugees, either domestic refugees or refugees from other countries. 10 years later, there was not even one refugee all over Europe. All the refugees, the problem was solved in a way or another. Either they were repatriated to another place or went back to their original place, or they got the citizenship of the place which they were. And their problem is solved. Compensations, yes, no, but people opened a new page in their life and start a new life. And today, even the Sudeten, those who were expelled from Czechoslovakia right after the war, were absorbed in the German society, and nobody really talks about the return of the Sudeten to the Sudetenland in North Czech Republic. Okay, and the relations between the Czech Republic and Germany are very good, in spite of the problem. So, because European mindset or modern, normal mindset looks at the refugee as something which should be solved. A refugee problem is something which should be solved in a way or another, and therefore the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees considers a refugee only up to 10 years, not a day more than 10 years, because within the 10 years, his problem should be solved in a way or another. A refugee cannot bequeath his status as a refugee to his children, because you have to finish with the problem at some point. A refugee gets only medical health, which in order to preserve his life. He doesn't get, cosmetic surgeries. This can wait until his problem will be solved. So he gets the minimum, and the UNHCR actually takes care of all the refugees in the whole world. And this is how the world relates to any refugee problem. However, when it comes to the Palestinian refugees, those who ran away from this country more than 73 years ago, they are treated by another agency of the United Nations, which is UNRWA, UN Relief and Work Agency of the United Nations. And their rules are totally different. First of all, you're a refugee, your children will be refugees, your grandchildren and great-grandchildren until the end of time. Secondly, you get everything. You get medical care, you get education, you get housing, you get whatever, food, of course. And you don't have to work, actually. You can live as wherever you like, only because you are a refugee, and you get the support of the whole world on the expense of the American and European taxpayer. And this agency actually preserves the problem rather than solve the problem, and this is one of the problems with the Palestinian refugees. Another thing which we should all carry in mind is that those Palestinian refugees from the 40s of the last century were not originally Palestinians. They are not original Palestinians, because many Arabs who live in this country, the so-called Palestine, until 1948, were actually from other countries. They came to work here some years before 48. They came from Egypt, they came from Syria, they came from Lebanon, they came from Jordan, what today Jordan. Even people who came from Bosnia, because they came either with the Ottoman Empire or the time of the British mandate over this country. They came to work here, just like they come today. They go today to Europe or to America to work. So they came as foreign workers and they remained here. But their names testify, like Masri, Egyptian, or Horani, which came from the Horan in Syria, or Sidawi, Dibini, places in Lebanon. Their names testify that they are not originally Palestinians. So they, in 48, they went back to the places from which they came originally from. So why should they have the right of return to this country? They returned already to their original countries. So this is another, I would say, a lie which is being sold to people who do not understand what goes on in the Middle East. The Arab League decided to put them in refugee camps and not let them go back to the houses and to the families which they originally came from, in order to preserve the problem and to push it over Israel when day comes, in order to get rid of the state of Israel or the Jewish majority of this country. After we Jews came back to our homeland, which was given to us by the United Nations and formerly by the League of Nations as of the Sanremo decisions of 1920. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel is more than willing to compensate those refugees, to give them, just compensation for the assets which they might have had here in this country, even before 1948, before the state was established. But many of them do not want the money, they want to come back. And to come back to the places which they lived. And this is totally impossible. I get to go to some examples. Refugees who ran away from Sheikh Munis. It's a village which was not far from Jaffa in those times. They want to go back to Sheikh Munis. The problem is that the whole University of Tel Aviv, the Tel Aviv University, is built on the same lands of Sheikh Munis. So what should be done with the Tel Aviv University? Fly in the air? Only because some people do not want to get just compensation for the assets which they might have had before 1948. The town of Netanya should fly in the air only because the people from Khalid would like to go back to their lands. Ra'anana in Israel should be erased only because some people from Khirbet Azun want to go back. Neighborhoods in Jerusalem should be wiped out because some Arabs want to come to the villages which they lived there, and they were shooting at the Jewish parts of Jerusalem before 1948. Okay? So, excuse me, this is totally unacceptable, totally unheard of, totally unprecedented anywhere in the world. Where did the refugees come back to eradicate a place which was built, on their lands, if they owned it, 70 or 80 years earlier? So this is why this whole thing about the Palestinian refugees issue is an artificial issue. And here comes the biggest point. Most of them, of those refugees in 1948, ran away from this country only because 5 Arab armies invaded Israel one day after it declared its independence. On the 16th of May, 1948, the Lebanese, the Syrian, the Jordanian, the Egyptian, and the Iraqi army invaded Israel in order to eradicate Israel and to eradicate all the Jews who lived here. Not to establish a Palestinian state. They came here in order to tear this country and to take parts to their own countries. Jordan actually succeeded to take what the so-called West Bank for 19 years, illegal occupation, which was done by Jordan. And the Arab radio stations called upon the Arabs who lived here to leave the country for 2 or 3 weeks until they get rid of the Zionist new state, and then they will come back to their homes. Unfortunately, from this side, this war did not succeed to eradicate Israel. Israel succeeded to survive with a great cost of 1% of the Jewish population here, who were killed, 6,000 people who were killed in that unfortunate war, bloody war. But Israel survived. And those who left for 2-3 weeks, because of the advice of the Arab radio stations, are today refugees in Lebanon, Syria. And in Syria, how did they treat them? They killed them in the Arab Spring, and most of them ran away from Syria. This is how they love the Palestinian refugees. In Lebanon, the refugees actually caused the civil war in 1975. A civil war which was for 14 years, since 75 all the way to 1989. And this was ignited by the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. Not to mention what happened beforehand in Jordan, which ended in the Black September of 1970, when King Hussein killed them, thousands of Palestinians, only because they put in danger his kingdom. So these Palestinian refugees were the problem in many places. And the Arab countries who created this problem should bear the consequences of creating the refugee problem by invading to Israel in 1948. Therefore, whoever talks today about the Palestinian refugees who should come back, right of return, this is totally unacceptable. It means the eradication of the state of Israel, because if millions of Arabs come here, this will not be Israel anymore. And there is absolutely no reason why Israel should sacrifice itself in order to solve a problem which Israel did not cause, but the Arab countries caused it, and a problem which was an artificial problem because those refugees, or many of them, are not even Palestinian originally. So this is how the world, the civilized world, the world which solves problems rather than perpetuate problems, like it is in the Middle East, should relate to the Palestinian problem as a problem which should have been solved by the Arab world decades ago and not been preserved until this very day. Thank you so much.
תוסיף רק דבר אחד, הפליטים היהודים. לא דיברת על זה.
אז זה תכניס לפני זה.
אני אכניס לפני זה.
And a very important point which we all should bear in mind. Israel absorbed more than a million Jewish refugees who ran away, who were forced to run away from Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Egypt, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, Iran, after 1948, because of the hatred to the Jews. And don't forget that the Jews in Libya were hunted by their neighbors when Rommel, the German, was in Libya, and were eradicated into concentration camps in Libya. People do not know it, but this was the attitude to Jews. And Israel absorbed all those millions of Jews who came from the Arab countries, and this was actually a population swap. Arabs left here, Jews came here, and in the 40s, this was the way how to solve problems between Turkey and Greece. Turkey absorbed the Muslim people who ran away from or left or were forced to leave the Balkans, and Greece absorbed the Christians, most of the Christians who ran away from Turkey. There were population swaps between India and Pakistan after the 40s, after Pakistan was established. So a swap of populations was a legitimate, acceptable way how to solve problems. And this is actually what was here. Arabs left, Jews came, and were absorbed. And one of my friends, Victor Nachmias, the late Victor Nachmias, once said in the BBC Arabic radio, he said that he came as a refugee from Egypt. He said, we Jews did not profess the refugeehood. Actually, we didn't make it into a profession. He actually related to the Palestinian refugees who made their refugeehood a profession to blackmail the conscience of the world in addition to the money of the world. So this is actually how the Palestinian refugee issue should be looked at and treated by the civilized world. Thank you so much.